All right, what's up, my Discovery peoples? So here we are, the famous speech. I would have to say that, this comes in around either, depending on who you are, like number one or number two on the Shakespeare hit list. There's that Romeo and Juliet thing where there's a speech from there that I'm not gonna mention. But this one, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Macbeth being one of the most quoted plays, period. But this speech, other than like out damn spot and Sleep No More. It's actually a place called Sleep No More. That's sort of themed after Macbeth. This is like the most quoted speech, the whole tomorrow speech. So I want to go through this really quick. You got the essay that's due on Thursday. And so let's get rid of the, first off, let me save this as an online tutorial. So go in here really quick. And we're going to label this model. Alright. And save that. Alright, here we go. Let's get rid of the picture really quick because we don't necessarily need that. Goodbye. And so again, when you're reading and you're doing what's for the most part called a close reading, right? So that means you're going to go, you're analyzing. Analyzing again is 3 parts, right? You're going to break things down, interpret each part, and then you're going to make micro inferences. You're making a micro inference between the parts as well as to like the overall theme, right? Now this is denouement. Okay, so we're gonna also keep that in mind. I don't know if I put that on the thing. I gotta keep that in mind. So this is the denouement. So he's basically here talking about like what life is like, or he's making a statement about life. So it is embedded in the play. So, a lot of people say that he's making a statement about Lady Macbeth, which is very true as well. But sort of the second literary device that's at play here that is the greater thing is like, this is his point where he's making, this overall statement about life in and of itself. So this being the denouement. All right, so yeah, this for this, we're looking at like what is the archetypal statement that he's making, the overall archetypal statement that he's making about the human experience. Where's my cursor here? This is why I hate. There you are. All right, so the overall archetypal statement about the human experience, right? So that's more so like what we're concerning ourselves with, right? And by archetypal statement, again, we're looking at like the universal human condition, right? All right, so Act 5, Scene 5, lines 20 to 31. So she should have died here after, obviously, she being Lady Macbeth, right? And again, Macbeth, at this point, she couldn't sleep, so she finally entered that final sleep, right? She's like, there was the whole sort of out damn spot thing. And then finally, she was trying to sleep, and then she was finally able to sleep by, committing suicide. But then he says she should have died hereafter. Now I included this because there's this colon here, right? And with the colon, let's see, let's do you like that. Yeah, so there's this colon there, right? And with that colon, basically it's saying that the rest of this is giving you an understanding of this word, hereafter. So she should have died hereafter. And hereafter is pretty much what the rest of this is giving you the definition, this extra explanation about. It says, there would have been time for such a word, right, as hereafter. Let's unitalicize this and make that a little bit better. So there's this statement about like hereafter, right? She should have died hereafter. She should have died later, right? This idea of later, right? And there would have been a time for such a word. That word being later or tomorrow, right? Time for such a word. Hold on a second, just technical difficulties here, right? So it would have been time for such a word, right? It would have been, but right now he's dealing with so much death at this point, right? And there would have been time for dealing with this idea of hereafter, right? And what word is he talking about? Well, he says the word tomorrow, right? And tomorrow. And tomorrow. That's the word that he's talking about, right? So you have this idea of like, would have been time for such a word, right? Hereafter, colon, it would have been time for such a word, right? What word is that? Well, it's that word being tomorrow. There would have been a time for like this idea of tomorrow. And at this point, there's a whole bunch of people at this point who used to have in this play, who used to have a tomorrow, right? A bunch of people who used to have a tomorrow, used to have a hereafter. And then what happened to their tomorrows? What happened to their hereafters? And who is responsible for the lack of those tomorrows or the hereafters, right? So there would have been a time for such a word, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Now, there's an inference that's being made here, just in this idea of tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Like, and you got to keep that in mind as well. When he says tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And the inference is the fact that it keeps going. Actually, let's do it like this. Dot, 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 dot. That's the inference, right? And tomorrow 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 and tomorrow. So the inference there, right, is that these ands keep going on. Like the tomorrows keep going on, but then the ands keep going on. Right? I mean, you're looking at the construction there, right? The syntactic syntactical construction, right? Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow gives you this inference that, okay, he's talking about like the future, right? And then it says, creeps in this petty pace from day to day, right? So what creeps? Well, tomorrow creeps. So now you have a bunch of adjectives that he's using here. And for that, we'll put those in blue, right? So he's saying something about tomorrow. Now tomorrow is being described, right? Tomorrow is being described in its motion. It creeps, right? And even the motion in and of itself is being accentuated by the prepositional phrase, in this petty pace, right? From day to day. Day to day is the same construction. Like, you take a look at this, right? Day to day is the same construction, same syntactical construction as tomorrow and tomorrow. Right? So when he says hereafter, he's talking about this day to day, lives that we lead. And he says these lives that we lead creep. Right? So creeps in this petty pace. So when something creeps, what does it do? It goes really slowly, right? I mean, especially like they actually had to go through when he was young, there was the plague and his mom got him away from that. Another massive plague took his son, right? And strangely enough, they were doing the same thing that we're doing now in the 2000s. So they're doing the same thing in the 1500s as they're doing now in 2000s, which is, they're telling people to stay home, social distancing, this and that and the other thing. For 500 years and we're still doing the same thing. Like, technology hasn't changed. So it's this idea of, the days, like being isolated like this. I'm pretty sure you're feeling it. The days are just creeping by, right? And in this petty pace, there's all this little stuff. So something's petty. It's little. It's insignificant, right? You don't even really notice it, right? So all these days, these tomorrows, right? These hereafters, are just sort of sneaking by, right? To the point where you don't even notice it, right? Creeps in this petty pace from day to day, right? To the last syllable of recorded time. Now he's getting metaphorical, right? To the last syllable of recorded time, right? To the histories. It could be human history. It could be, world history. Let's put you in something that we can see. Purple? Yeah. Right? It could be human history. It could be, but it's like, it's looking at this idea of, these tomorrows being like, or your days being like a story, right? The events that are happening. If somebody, people have their individual stories, human history, human beings in of themselves have our collective histories, and every person has their individual histories, right? But to the last syllable of recorded time, it's just sort of like at some point the individual histories stop, and it says and again, this idea of death, right? The last syllable. So here, bringing up that old specter of death. Last syllable of recorded time. So there, we're dealing with this idea of death, right? So you have this sort of juxtaposition between like a future and the end of that future, right? And even though the future is not even really, I mean, he's saying up to this point, future is not even really paid attention to. The days that you live are not even really paid attention to, right? They're petty. You know, it's just like having, lint in your pocket. You know, you don't think of it necessarily as gold, like, right? Cause it's everywhere. I got so many days, right? That a day is not a precious thing, right? To the last syllable of recorded time, then all of a sudden, you don't have any days left. And then he says, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools. Right? So all our yesterdays. So, and again, you got to keep in mind, there's this comma there. Right? So the point that the fact that there's a comma there means that the point that he's making is not over. There's a relationship that's going on, between these clauses. And that's something that's sort of missing in a lot of interpretations that I see, right? So tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays, right? So when we get to this point of the last syllable of recorded time, all our yesterdays, right? Think about how we spent our lives at that point, right? At that point, you hit the ledge, you're about to go over, and it's just like, that point, you sit there and you go, how should I have spent those days? Right? What should I have done? Right? So all our yesterdays have lighted. So we're looking at So again, this is only because of the fact that you're facing the end. So this idea of all our yesterdays, right? This idea of reflection, right? Have lighted fools. The reflection, right, of how we spent our lives has made us a lot more aware, right? So that reflection has made us more aware, right? And that awareness comes not because of the fact that we have a whole bunch of extra days to spend, right? That reflection comes because we have fewer days, right? It's like, oh, man, it's like, like you sit there and you have a bag of, I don't know, your favorite candy or your favorite M&Ms, and you're just giving out M&Ms to everybody. And then at some point you realize, you look in the bag and you realize you only got 3 M&Ms left. And you're like, oh, wait a second, man, I kind of wish, right? Or if it was the last bag of M&Ms ever, right? And you're looking at the last 3 and you're like, man, I wish I had savored those, right? have lighted fools. So he's looking back at the last syllable of recorded time and he's going, whoa, okay. There would have been a time to think about tomorrow. There would have been a time to think about the future, right? Because now I realize we treat each day like trash, right? We just throw it away. We toss it away. It's a petty, what does he say? It's a petty thing. Why is it a petty thing? Because it just sort of slides by. We don't even really notice it. It creeps by, right? And then when we hit that last syllable, right? And then we start thinking about our yesterdays. And we're like, yo. And then, and the archetypal thing is, I wish. Right? And then we start to feel foolish, is what he's saying. Archetypally, he's saying we feel foolish at that point. Right? They have lighted the fools the way to dusty death, because that's where we all end up at some point. That last syllable, that dusty death, right? Ashes to ashes, dust to... So then he goes on to the next one, right? Dusty death. Out, brief candle. Right? So in this, you have both. You have the death and life as a statement. So I'll make it bold and underline it, but I'll put it in red as well. Right? Because in there, he's saying, okay, yeah, there's death, which is the out part. But then there's like the brief candle part. So it's just like, yeah, you got this life, but, in comparison, because again, last syllable of recorded time is, you think about human history as well. When you think about an individual's history compared to human history, at max, you got 100 years, human history is millennia. At max, you have a century, right? And so it seems like this brief thing, right? And especially, and this is something that you should be, like, if you're writing about this, there should be a connection there. When he says out, brief candle, he's also pointing in a micro inference right back to the idea of the creeping and the petty pace, right? Because it can seem like a long, fulfilling life, but if you haven't paid attention to the day-to-day, if you let those moments just sort of creep by and not really do anything with them, then yeah, it's going to seem like it went too fast, especially when you're facing the last day. Mm-hmm. So then he says, life's but a walking shadow. Right? So life's but a walking shadow. Now think about it. A shadow is not the real thing. Okay. Right? So life's but a walking shadow. Let's put this in red, actually. Okay. So he says, life's but a walking shadow. Right? He's like, okay, what does he mean by that? And it's like, wow, okay, I still don't understand that. Right? Well, then that's why you have what? The punctuation there, right? There's that comma. So what does he mean by a walking shadow? Well, what he means is what the definition he's about to give you. So walking shadow is a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. Right? So a walking shadow is poor player. A player is like a actor in this particular case, right? So think about what an actor is. An actor is not, we used to have these commercials where it says, I'm not actually a dentist, but I play one on TV, right? I mean, as much as, you might love your, Denzel Washington for being on, what was that, he was a doctor. I wouldn't want him operating on me. You know what I'm saying? I might have him put that, invite him over to have, pretend operate. But if something was actually happening, even though he might have played a doctor, I think that series was on TV for about 10 years, a player is just an actor, and an actor is not the real thing. Okay. So when he says life's a walking shadow, a poor player, and in other words, a bad actor at that, right? So it's not even just the fact that life's, people are just acting, but they're bad actors as well, right? That struts, and why are they bad actors? So there again is a reason. So that strut and fret. So the poor player, that being there tells you that you're going to give you more information about why this actor is a poor actor, right? A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage. So the poor player, because of the fact that, he's hamming it up. He's making a lot of noise, right? And that noise can either be, let's make you like green. No, blue. I like blue. Right? He's hamming it up. That's why he's a bad actor. Struts. Like, you strutting, you like, you want to strut, right? And you all like, Mr. Big and everything like that, right? Got a lot of money, got a lot of fashion, got a lot of, you look good and this and that thing, or frets, right? You're complaining all the time and, you're the squeakiest, you're the squeaky wheel. Make sure, 28. Okay. You're the squeaky wheel, right? Woe is me, everything, yada, yada, right? That struts and frets his hour upon the stage. And that hour, again, upon the stage, being life, right? It's going right back to this idea of out, brief candle. Right? That hour upon the stage, we want to make that red, being life itself, right? Yeah. But he's sitting up there thinking, I'm Mr. Big Shot, and this series is never going to get canceled. Right? Not really realizing everybody's series at some point is going to get canceled. So he struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then it heard, he's strutting, oh, I'm on the stage. He's fretting, oh, woe is me. and then is heard no more, going right back to death. So you're doing all this stuff, you're making all this noise, and at the end, you're facing the thing that everybody else faces. And this is one of the most archetypal speeches ever, because it doesn't matter if you're rich, it doesn't matter if you're poor, it doesn't matter if you're beautiful, it doesn't matter if you're ugly. Death is one of the most unbiased, neutral mofos in nature. It doesn't care how much money you got in your pocket. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care, whether you can get a high score on what video game. It doesn't care about any of our little trivial things, right? And so this is one of the reasons why it's like one of the most archetypal speeches ever, because he's just like, everybody has this moment, It's this moment where all of us at some point are heard of no more, right? And he says, it is a tale. And the tale going right back to this idea of the last syllable of recorded time, right? So it is a tale told by an idiot. Don't do that. Okay. So it is a tale. And that tale, back up. Back it up. Okay. It's heard no more. It is a tale. So that tale, going back to this idea of the last syllable of recorded time, right? All of us have, all of our lives is a tale, right? We all have, these stories that are our lives. It's a tale told by an idiot. Now, the idiot could be two things. Number one, this could be a moment of self-awareness and self-loathing for Macbeth, right? Because he's thinking of himself as the poor player at this point, right? The idiot could also be God, right? And you're thinking about the larger like tale, the larger recorded time. And God in this particular case being not God, Allah, Buddha, Allah, Yahweh, whatever, right? God in this case being his God, the one who created Macbeth as well as Macbeth's world, which is Shakespeare. Shakespeare calling himself an idiot. Full of sound and fury, right? And sound and fury, again, going back to this idea of struts and frets, right? We all have these moments of like sound and fury, especially like when we turn it up in the club, right? So, full of sound and fury, right? But signifying and it's apropos. This is right by it. This is ended up on the page by itself as I scroll down, signifying nothing. Now, part of your essay should be whether